This video is all about what to look for in a good boondocking campsite. I camp and travel in my RAV4 here about 70 to 90 nights a year, and I'd say 99% of that is free boondocking. I can't even remember the last time I paid for a campsite. And so in this video I'm going to go over the, I think, 13 or 14 things to consider when looking for a boondocking campsite out in the middle of nowhere. And I forgot to mention that I'm boondocked right now in the beautiful forests of western New Mexico. Great free campsite that I just randomly found by going down a couple of random dirt roads. I have here my little cheat sheet that has the 13 or 14 things on it. That is what to look for in a campsite and things to keep in mind. The first is legality. That's really the big one. Is it legal to camp where you're thinking of camping? Is it BLM land? Is it national forest land? Is it private land? Is it public land, but public land that has restrictions on where you can camp, like in a national park, for example? If the spot you're considering is not legal, don't camp there. Just don't do it. Once legality is taken care of, really the main thing that I look for is seclusion. I want to be away from other campers. You may be different. Maybe you like the comfort of having other campers nearby. For me, if I can see another person camped, it's too close. And so I will try to find a place that feels more secluded to me. I like my peace and quiet when I'm out on the road. I like my privacy. And so I try to camp away from busy roads, and usually I don't have a problem finding a spot that's more secluded. If I'm in a really popular area, for example, I've camped around Moab in like March and April, which is a really busy and popular time there. And there's one spot that it's really popular because it's really close to the entrance of Arches National Park, but you're not going to be alone there. You're not going to be secluded. You're not going to be able to avoid seeing other campers and hear other campers parked nearby. And so sometimes it is worth foregoing that privacy for the convenience of where you're going to be the next day. It's different every night. Sometimes you want to be close to the thing that you're seeing the next day. Sometimes you want to be way out in the middle of nowhere where no one would ever be able to find you. The third thing I look for, and these aren't necessarily in order of importance, these are just kind of in a list, and I'm just talking about each one. So the third thing is basically the aesthetics of the campsite. What are the views like? What's the position like? Is it pretty? Is it trashy? Is it is it nice? Is it a nice spot? This isn't super important all the time. Again, sometimes convenience trumps everything else, but most of the time I do try to find a nice campsite, one with nice views or in a good position, and I usually will take the extra time and spend the extra gas money to go a little bit further if that means that I can find a place that's just really spectacular. The fourth thing I look for and think about is sun and shade. In summer, I want a place that's shaded. In winter, I want a place that is sunny. And sometimes just in one immediate campsite, you can kind of position your car to be in different states of shaded or in sunlight throughout the day. So for example, right now, I'm parked in the shade of this tree right here, but if I were to move my car back 10 or 15 feet, I'd be in the sun. A lot of the times you can do that at a campsite. Other times you can't do that. Either the campsite is all sun or all shade, basically all the time. And so depending on the season, depending on the weather and the temperature, that's something to consider. The fifth thing that I think about is coziness or shelteredness. I like campsites that aren't exposed on all sides. I like being up against a tree or up against a hill or up against a cliff. It just feels more cozy and protected to me, and I like that. This is also something to consider if it's windy. That same tree or hill or cliff can provide a break from the wind, for better or for worse. If it's hot, you're probably going to want the wind. If it's cold, you're not going to want the wind, so keep that in mind. The next thing to consider is the flatness of the campsite. You're going to want to find a place that's more or less flat. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. For example, in my car, my bed is incline slightly, like where my head is up maybe a couple inches from the rest of me. And so I can park on places that are slightly inclined down, and my head and my upper body is still flat. And so just know your rig, know how well you sleep on different angles. For me, I can sleep as long as it's not, you know, a 45-degree angle. I can sleep if it's a little bit wonky in any direction. You may be different, but that's definitely something to consider. If you have the space and the desire, you can get some leveling blocks. I just don't really have the space to carry those in my RAV4, but if you're in a bigger RV, absolutely take some leveling blocks with you, get some off of Amazon, and then you don't really need to worry about how flat the spot is. Phone reception is something to consider. How good of a signal do you get on your phone? Maybe you want to completely disconnect from technology and you don't care. If you don't have a good phone signal, that's fine. If so, don't worry about this one. But maybe if you do want to be able to call out if you need help, or if you want people to be able to contact you, or if you want to, you know, browse the web and find information or check email or get some work done, whatever you need to do. If the quality of the cell signal is something that's important to you, that's probably going to be a pretty high up there factor in determining whether a certain spot will work well for you. For the next one, I don't really remember what number I'm on here, but it is something that I kind of alluded to earlier, and that's the proximity of where you're going to be the next day, or the proximity of where you were earlier that day. So for example, earlier today, I was hiking in El Malpais National Monument in western New Mexico, and I finished a couple hours ago. Didn't want to drive too far to find a spot, so I just kind of drove around the BLM land outside of the National Monument and found a spot to camp. Proximity to where I was important because I didn't want to drive forever to try to find a campsite. I was basically done for the day and I just wanted to set up camp quickly. The other side of this is thinking of where you're going to be tomorrow morning, or where you're going to go the next day. So for example, if I were going to go to Four Corners tomorrow, I would want to park and camp probably as close to that as possible so that I could get an early start and I could pack more into my day. So however you want to look at it, whether it's proximity to where you were earlier or proximity to where you're going to be later, that is something that's really important to think about. The next thing to think about is the ease of getting to the campsite. If there's an amazing campsite, but it's 50 miles out of your way up a super crazy steep rocky road, it's probably not worth your effort. Maybe it is, but probably not. You want a place that's closer to you, that's easier to get to. You want a place that doesn't have a crazy road to get into. You don't want the road to be too muddy or snowy or sandy or anything like that. Water is something that you're going to want to think about. Maybe you want to be next to water. Maybe you like the water. Maybe you don't want to be next to water because maybe if you're in a wet place, that's where more mosquitoes are. Just depends on the season, depends on where you are, elevation, everything like that. If you're in the western US, also know that a lot of the BLM land is open for cattle grazing. And so cows can congregate along little streams and things like that. And so if you have, I don't know, if you have a cow phobia, then just keep that in mind. And don't be surprised if you do see cows around you. Next up, how safe is the place? This is another one that should be right up at the top. If a place isn't safe or doesn't seem safe, don't camp there. What exactly safe or not safe means to you is different than what it means to me. Maybe to you, being safe means camping around other people. Maybe it means not camping around other people. Maybe it means having an easy escape route onto the main road. Maybe it means not camping next to standing dead trees, next to widowmakers that could get blown over in a windstorm and crush your car and kill you. And then the last big thing that I wanted to talk about is the size of the campsite. How big of a campsite do you need? How big of a campsite do you want? This spot here where I am now could hold, I don't know, half a dozen rigs of various sizes. That could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. If it's a really popular camping area, it's maybe not so great for me to take up a big spot like this. A, because that's kind of being a jerk, but B, because someone else could just pull up right next to me. And I wouldn't blame them. If it is busy, then, you know, all's fair. A better option would be to take a spot that fits the size of your vehicle so that other people aren't tempted to share that spot with you, and so that you don't have any unwanted neighbors. And that's it for most of the things to think about and watch out for when looking for a boondocking campsite. There are a few other little things to be aware of and to consider, like trash. Some campsites just have trash laying around because of how often they get used, or maybe just because one jerk decided to dump his garbage out all over the place. It's a sad fact of camping. Also, does the spot have a fire ring? A fire ring is good because that indicates that people have camped there before, which means that it's probably okay to camp there. Not always, of course, but you know, it's a good indicator. And also, if you want to have a fire, then it's nice, obviously, to have a fire ring that you don't have to build, that's already there. Then you can just get right to work with building your fire. And then there are lots of other things that could come into play here. Maybe you want a spot that has a couple of trees that are close together so that you can hang up your hammock. Maybe you want a place that's just barely down the road from a popular trailhead so that you can use the toilet at the trailhead the next morning. Lots of little things that you should be thinking about, but the things that I've mentioned here are the main things. And if you think about these things as you're looking for a campsite, it'll help you decide whether that is a good spot or not, and maybe help you decide between a couple different spots. And these are just good things to think about. Think about which of these things is important to you most of the time, and then which things may or may not be important at other times. Let me know what you think. Let me know what other things should be on my list here. Let me know what you think are the most important things, and what you look for in a boondocking campsite. And I'd love to hear your input. Also, let me know if you have any questions. And that's it. Thanks for watching.